I'm here to talk about individual advocacy, and as I believe John Donne once said, no man is an island, and the same can be said of advocacy. No individual advocate is really an individual. They are always connected with other people who we turn to for support and guidance and resources. It's important to set the stage because the nature of acquired brain injury is such that people who go through the journey of acquiring a brain injury often don't suffer alone, but also with their loved ones and those that care about them. It's often a context of extreme uncertainty. The future is often very unpredictable. What we know is that there are a range of shifts in dependency from the moment a person arrives to hospital, is transferred from ED to theatre, and eventually to inpatient and outpatient clinics. There are important shifts in dependency that we'll look at later. Of course, as people go through the rehabilitation process, what we know from research is that people, as they become aware of their deficits and what they're not able to do anymore, we know that that causes increasing distress and depression. Supports that were once readily available to people often diminish, and confusion as to what supports and services are available tends to set in, not just with clients but family members as well. And of course, there are a range of preferences that are often at odds with each other, beginning with the client to those who care about them, and service providers as well. Working as an individual advocate, one thing I do when I meet a client for the first time is I consider where they are in time. I keep in mind that it's not just about when the injury occurred. I keep in mind that between the injury and the discharge from inpatient care, and from discharge from inpatient care to eventual discharge from outpatient care, each of these stages represents a critical window of time in which people are often in a crisis. Being hit by a motor vehicle accident, for example, is a time of crisis. Being discharged from inpatient care is often a time of crisis because people are not certain about what supports might be available to them or who they can call on to provide care. And so it is until we get to the client that we meet here at Headwest. They've often been through this process and they're either very much engaged or disengaged from disability services. And as I said earlier, it's critical that I keep in mind as an advocate that each successive stage from the time of injury to outpatient care and eventual engagement with community services represents an increasing awareness of deficits. This awareness is not just of the client themselves, but family members as well. We know from research that this is a time window in which patients can develop really critical beliefs about what's actually possible for them and their future. It's during this time that they're at risk of developing cognitive belief systems, so things like learned helplessness, that can limit the extent to which they rely on strengths and utilize coping strategies that are actually positive and beneficial to clients. So I also keep this in mind as well. This is another important consideration for me. And just to give you an example of the type of clients, I've just made a simple table here. I've changed the names of the clients, the ages, and some of the circumstances. But in a given day, I can work with between, say, 5 and 10 different clients, some of which might have got their brain injury from drugs. Others might have been attacked in an assault. Most of my clients, however, have been involved in a motor vehicle accident, be it a bus, a motorcycle, they've been a pedestrian, they've been hit by a car. If we take Pierre here, and all these names are in French to de-identify these people, if we take Pierre here, he is a 42-year-old male who sustained his brain injury 10 years ago from an assault in a shopping centre car park. Currently he's incarcerated. He doesn't have any psychiatric support despite the fact he has at least 4 known mental illnesses. He has multiple violence restraining orders and he has an unresolved drug addiction from childhood. Now, as an individual advocate, I know for a fact that I couldn't ever put a dent in this difficult and complex predicament. I need to consult with other advocates, people who are more experienced and who have greater insight into services to most effectively advocate for this client. So as an example, I might consult with my colleague Jason and Lisa and my CEO, Leanne Brensel. And together we'll meet and we'll discuss what it is this client actually needs. What is it that could best serve them to not just exit prison, but to actually reintegrate into society, to reform connections with his family who have multiple VROs against him, and to link him into services that can help him overcome his drug addiction, as well as providing him access to community psychiatric services. This is an example of quite a standard case that we'll deal with that has multiple layers to it, and that's why it's important that I collaborate with my colleagues. The next client we have here is Gabrielle. She's 29 years old and she sustained a motor vehicle accident at the age of 17. This case relates more to Gabrielle's inability to know how to register with the Disability Services Commission. She's heard about it, she has friends who have linked into it, but she's not actually aware of how she herself can link into it. Her mother is at a loss as well. In addition to that, she has compliance issues with her medical regime, so she's not attending appointments or taking medication. So again, this is a case where I wouldn't just operate alone. I would consult with, in this case, a local area coordinator who works at the Disability Services Commission. And in working with that person, I can actually introduce this client to the local area coordinator, perhaps meet with my CEO as well, Leanne, and we can formulate the best plan forward. It might actually turn out that she needs much more than just registration with the DSC, and it might actually turn out again that there's another alternative. If we go to Zoe, she's 55 years old, and she had a stroke at the age of 3. Because she had a stroke at the age of 3, the medical records are pretty vague about when she was first diagnosed with having a stroke. We know that she has epilepsy and that she's a falls risk because of that epilepsy. She has accommodation issues and she's socially isolated. In this situation, I'd be looking at a person who has needs that range from the medical to the social as well. And most importantly, relying on the very things that I spoke about first, I will need to really find out what she believes is actually possible. There are 2 questions that really relate to her motivation to become connected to services that could help her with accommodation or to get her access to the community. The first question is it worth it? If Zoe doesn't believe it's worth it, it doesn't matter how well I pitch the idea to her, it just won't be a viable option because she won't engage with it. The second question that is critical is I need to find out if she thinks she's able to do it. So the question, can I do it, is just as important. She might want to engage, but she might not know how. Once I've determined that, I'm in a better position to help her increase her compliance with taking her medication. I can get her support, community support for her falls, her being a falls risk, perhaps through a community OT. I can link her into the Department of Housing. Perhaps we could look at community housing as well. And I can refer her onto a program run at Brightwater, where they run a social inclusion program. Clement is a different case altogether. He's 13 years old. He was hit by a car as a pedestrian. And what sets him apart from everyone else is that he got compensated from the Insurance Commission. But as is the case with many clients who are hit by a car or get injured at a young age, and when they're compensable, the issue is not so much about the amount of money they're going to receive, it's about determining that amount of money and providing services between the time of injury and the time of compensation. For Clement, he'll probably be about 18 or 19 before the Insurance Commission provide him a substantial amount of money that will factor in his future opportunities. So we're looking at liaising with the Insurance Commission here, we're liaising with case management, we're liaising with the school, and we're also working very closely with the family to determine the needs of Clement. As it turns out, Clement needs support at school, so he has in place an educational assistant. He also needs tutoring during the week, so that has been set up. He also has issues when it comes to liaising with various medical specialists, and so his mother needs support to get him to his appointments on time. And again, I'll be liaising very closely with caseworkers. Finally, we've got Lorenzo here. He's 28, and he got a traumatic brain injury in the war. This is a refugee, and he's come to Australia without any medical documentation, without any evidence of a brain injury. And so I'll rely very closely on my colleague Lisa, who will specialise in determining the evidence for his brain injury. So his issues are a little different. So he doesn't have a documented ABI. He's a former refugee. He's on a Centrelink pension that was recently removed, and he has temporary accommodation that won't last him till Christmas. So here we need to look at a variety of services to implement to help him engage with, because as it turns out, simply focusing on his medical needs will leave him homeless, but simply focusing on his homeless needs will leave him without the medical care that he needs as well. So it's going to be a multifaceted approach, and I'll do this with the help of my colleagues Lisa and Jason. I'll meet with him several times and we'll create a plan to go forward. So that's just an example. I'll just finish with a story. Often working as an advocate, it takes a long time to see wins. It takes many hurdles before we actually see progress. One client I will speak about is a client of mine who's 33. I've changed his name and his age so to keep him anonymous, but we'll call him Mark. Mark is a single dad who lost his kids to the Department of Child Protection several years ago. He has long-standing drug addictions. The most common one is methamphetamine, and he currently has several VROs as well. And in the period of 6 months that I work with Mark, what I did know quite clearly from the beginning was that he had no desire whatsoever to give up his drugs, and he actually refused to do anything about his accommodation situation. He was homeless. So over the 6-month period, through working with other colleagues and people in the sector, I was able to, with Mark, formulate a plan to help him see things a bit differently, to help him say yes to the question of, is it worth it and can I do it? Just recently we met up, and for the first time he announced to me that he wants to stop drugs altogether because he wants his kids back. That was a big enough motivation for him to do it. My role now is simply to help him become capable of doing that by helping him access residential drug services and drug counsellors, and to give him that confidence that he is able to do this. This is a great win. And that's, I guess, what this plant growing through the wall represents. It was a breakthrough. And I guess we stalk these breakthroughs as advocates. And it just makes all the work all the more worth it. So thanks for listening, and I hope this has been of use to you.